My husband called me at 4 a.m. to ask, "Why didn't you tell me you had a baby before me?" "I don't have a baby, dummy." I mumbled into the phone, still half asleep. "Really? 'Cause I'm seeing pictures of you at the hospital literally giving birth. You and I can talk when you're ready to stop lying." His voice was cold and hurt. The line went dead before I could respond. I sat up in bed completely confused. Marvin and I had been married for 3 years and together for 5. We'd been trying to have a baby for the last year with no luck. The idea that I'd hidden a previous pregnancy from him was insane. My phone started buzzing nonstop. Text after text flooding in. I opened my messages to find 23 unread texts from my sister Daniela, each one more frantic than the last. "I understand if you needed to hide your pregnancy from your husband, but your own sister? Your own family?" Her most recent message made my stomach drop. I typed back quickly that I had no idea what was going on and that I'd never had a baby or been pregnant, but she'd already sent screenshots. Pictures of someone who looked exactly like me in a hospital bed holding a newborn. Another of me in a hospital gown looking exhausted but happy. They looked so real I almost doubted my own memory. More messages poured in. My mom asking why I'd kept this secret. My best friend Jane hurt that I hadn't told her. My cousin congratulating me on the baby boy. Everyone had seen these pictures somewhere and believed them completely. I threw on a robe and headed downstairs to get my laptop. Maybe if I could see where these photos were posted, I could figure out what was happening. But when I reached my front door, I froze. There was a gift bag on the welcome mat that hadn't been there when I'd locked up last night. The tag read, "For our son," written in handwriting I recognized immediately. My hands shook as I brought the bag inside and set it on the kitchen counter. Part of me wanted to throw it away unopened, but I needed to know what was inside. Baby clothes. Tiny blue onesies and sleepers for a newborn boy. Each piece had tags still on from expensive baby boutiques. At the bottom was another note in the same handwriting. "For our son." Again, but this time with a heart drawn next to it. That handwriting belonged to my ex-boyfriend Roy. We'd dated for 2 years before I met Marvin. The relationship had ended badly when I caught him lying about everything from his job to his family. He'd stalked me for months afterward until I got a restraining order. I hadn't heard from him in over 4 years. I grabbed my phone and searched for his Facebook profile. What I found made me physically sick. His page was full of photos of us as a happy family. Me in a hospital bed that I'd never been in. Him holding a baby that didn't exist. Pictures of our son's nursery that he'd apparently set up in his apartment. The photos looked incredibly real. My face perfectly placed on another woman's body. The lighting and shadows all correct. Some even showed details like my tattoo on my wrist and the scar on my chin from a childhood accident. He'd used AI to create an entire fake life where we were together and had a child. And now my whole family believed me. And my husband was about to leave me because of it. I grabbed my laptop with shaking hands and started taking screenshots of everything on Roy's Facebook page before he could delete it. My fingers fumbled as I saved each fake photo, the timestamps showing posts going back 3 months, and all the comments from his friends congratulating him on becoming a dad. The screen blurred through my tears as I captured photo after photo of this fake life he'd created, each one more detailed than the last. I tried calling Marvin again, but it went straight to voicemail after one ring, so I texted him the link to Roy's page with a desperate message explaining this was all fake, and Roy was my stalker ex who had a restraining order against him. The read receipt showed he'd seen it within seconds, but no response came back. I searched online for how to report AI-generated fake images, and found myself lost in technical terms and legal jargon that made no sense. Most sites said I needed proof the images were fake, which seemed backward since I couldn't prove something that never happened didn't happen. My phone rang and Daniela's name flashed on the screen. I answered hoping to explain, but she started yelling before I could get a word out about how I'd betrayed the whole family and broken Mom's heart by hiding a grandchild. When I tried to tell her about Roy and the restraining order, she said I was making up crazy stories to cover my lies and the line went dead. I realized I needed to document the gift bag and baby clothes as evidence, so I grabbed my phone and photographed everything including the price tags from expensive boutiques and Roy's handwritten notes. My hands wouldn't stop trembling as I sealed everything in a large plastic bag from the kitchen drawer, making sure not to smudge any fingerprints that might be on them. I called the non-emergency police line and explained about the restraining order violation and the fake photos online. The officer on the phone sounded skeptical when I mentioned AI-generated photos and told me I'd need to come to the station to file a report in person. Before leaving for the police station, I changed all my passwords on every account I could think of, my fingers flying across the keyboard as I updated banking, email, and social media passwords. I checked my home security system and scrolled through the footage from last night, but there was nothing showing Roy leaving the gift bag, because my outdoor camera had been offline for 2 hours between midnight and 2 in the morning. At the police station, I waited 45 minutes before meeting Detective Seth Riddle, who actually took my report seriously once I showed him the restraining order paperwork from 4 years ago. He took photos of the baby clothes and gift bag, wrote down Roy's Facebook page information, and said he'd look into it, but warned me that proving AI manipulation could be complicated and take time. I texted Jane asking if she could come over later because I really needed support from my best friend right now. Her response came back cold and short, saying she needed time to process being lied to for months about something this big. The isolation felt suffocating as I sat alone in my car in the police station parking lot, everyone I loved believing these lies about me. Back home, I found an email from my workplace HR department that had come in while I was at the police station. They said they'd been contacted about my maternity leave request and needed to discuss discrepancies in my records since I hadn't filed any pregnancy accommodation paperwork. My stomach dropped, realizing Roy might have contacted my employer too, potentially putting my job at risk on top of everything else. I spent the rest of the morning searching online for experts who could prove the photos were fake, scrolling through dozens of websites for digital forensic specialists and image analysis companies. Most charged thousands just for a consultation, and I kept getting more panicked with each price quote I saw. After 3 hours of searching, I found Jacinta Schneider's website, a specialist in AI manipulation and deepfake detection, who worked with law enforcement and had testified in court cases. Her consultation fee made me wince, but I filled out her contact form anyway, explaining my situation and begging for help. My phone buzzed with a text from Marvin, and my heart jumped, hoping he'd finally believe me, but the message made everything worse. He'd checked into the Marriott downtown and already contacted a divorce lawyer, attaching one of the fake hospital photos where I looked exhausted but happy holding a newborn. "The detail is too perfect to be fake," he wrote, and I threw my phone across the couch in frustration. I couldn't just sit at home waiting for my life to fall apart, so I grabbed my laptop with all the screenshots I'd taken and drove to my mom's house without calling first. She answered the door in her bathrobe and stepped back when she saw me, not inviting me in right away like she normally would. I pushed past her into the living room and set up my laptop on the coffee table, pulling up Roy's Facebook page before she could tell me to leave. She sat on the opposite end of the couch, keeping distance between us like I might be dangerous or unstable, her arms crossed and face tight with hurt. I clicked through the fake photos one by one, zooming in to show her the weird lighting that didn't match between my face and the body, pointing out how the shadows fell wrong. In one image, my wrist tattoo appeared backwards like a mirror image, and in another, the hospital room had 2 different light sources that made no sense. Mom leaned forward slightly, squinting at the screen as I showed her how the symmetry of my face was too perfect in some shots, a common sign of AI generation. She started to look less angry and more confused, asking how someone could even do this with computers. The doorbell rang and Mom went to answer it, coming back with Daniela, who'd been called over to deal with me. My sister stood with her arms crossed, glaring at me until I pulled up the old police reports on my laptop, showing them the restraining order from 4 years ago. I walked them through Roy's stalking after our breakup, how he'd shown up at my work and followed me home and sent hundreds of texts until I got the court order. Daniela's face changed from anger to concern as she read through the police reports, sitting down next to Mom to look closer at the evidence. We spent 2 hours going through everything, and by the end both of them were starting to believe me, Mom even making coffee while we talked. That evening back at home, my phone lit up with a security alert that someone had tried logging into my Instagram from an unknown device. Then another alert for my Facebook and another for my email, all within minutes of each other. Roy had to be trying to get into my accounts, maybe to post more fake content or delete evidence of what he'd done. I changed all my passwords again, turning on 2-factor authentication on everything, and checking my account activity for any successful logins. My phone rang, and Detective Riddle's name appeared on the screen. He'd gone to Roy's last known address, but nobody answered, and the landlord said Roy had moved out 2 months ago without leaving forwarding information. The detective was now officially looking for Roy to question him about violating the restraining order and would let me know as soon as they found him. After hanging up, I went back to Jacinta Schneider's website and saw she'd already responded to my inquiry, saying she could see me tomorrow morning for an emergency consultation. The retainer fee would max out my credit card, but I booked the appointment anyway, uploading all the fake photos and screenshots to her secure portal. She replied that she'd need the original image files to run them through detection software that could identify the digital fingerprints of AI generation. My cousin texted asking if I needed help with the baby, offering to bring over diapers and formula, and I realized the fake news had spread beyond immediate family. I drafted a group message explaining that the photos were fake and Roy was stalking me again, sending it to 23 relatives with links to articles about deepfakes. Within minutes, responses started coming back with several relatives saying I needed psychological help and others asking why I would make up such a crazy story. My aunt said she'd seen the photos and they looked completely real, while my uncle accused me of having a mental breakdown from the stress of infertility. That night, I couldn't settle down, getting up every few minutes to check the locks on all the doors and windows. Every car that drove by made me freeze, wondering if it was Roy watching the house. The house creaked and I jumped, then felt stupid for being so scared in my own home. I moved a kitchen knife from the drawer to my nightstand, hating that Roy had made me feel unsafe in the place where I should feel most secure. Around midnight, I gave up on sleep and sat in the living room with all the lights on, refreshing my security camera app every few minutes. The knife sat on the coffee table within reach while I researched more about cyberstalking and identity theft, trying to understand what else Roy might do. The next morning, Jacinta's office smelled like old coffee and printer ink when I arrived for my appointment at 9 sharp. She pulled up the fake photos on 3 different monitors and ran them through software that highlighted weird pixel patterns I'd never noticed before. The areas around my face glowed red on her screen, showing where the AI had stitched my features onto someone else's body. She zoomed in on one hospital photo and pointed at my neck where the lighting came from 2 different directions, impossible in a real photo. Another program analyzed the metadata and showed the images were created just 2 weeks ago, not 9 months ago when a baby would have been born. Jacinta typed up her findings while I sat there watching the technical terms fill the screen, things like GAN artifacts and neural network signatures that proved these were fake. She printed out a 12-page report with charts and graphs showing exactly how the photos were made, signing it with her credentials as a certified digital forensics examiner. I sent the report to Marvin immediately with a text begging him to look at the evidence, but his response came back cold and short, saying anyone could pay an expert to write whatever they wanted. My chest felt tight reading his words. knowing he still thought I was lying about having a secret baby. Detective Riddle called while I was driving home from Jacinta's office to tell me he'd gotten footage from my neighbor's doorbell camera. The video showed someone in a dark hoodie at my door at 2:17 a.m. carrying that gift bag, though the person kept their face turned away from the camera. He was pulling footage from other houses on the street to track where the person came from and which car they drove. My phone rang again, and this time it was my boss asking me to come in for an urgent meeting, her voice sounding strange and formal. The conference room had 3 people waiting when I arrived. My boss, someone from HR, and another manager I barely knew. They slid printed emails across the table showing messages from my work email requesting maternity leave starting next month, complete with attached doctor's notes. I explained about Roy and showed them the police report number Detective Riddle had given me, my hands shaking as I pointed out I'd never sent those emails. HR took notes and said they'd investigate the email headers to see where the messages really came from, but I could tell they were looking at me differently now. Mom called as I sat in my car outside work, her voice soft and careful as she told me she'd spent all night reading about deepfakes and AI manipulation. She said she believed me now and felt terrible for doubting me, offering to call other family members to explain what was really happening. Her support hit me hard, and I started crying for the first time since this whole nightmare began, ugly sobs in my car while she stayed on the phone making soothing sounds. After I calmed down, I went home and started searching my own name on Google, finding something that made my stomach drop. Roy had created accounts on 3 different parenting forums using my name and email variations, posting questions about breastfeeding and sleep schedules for our newborn son. The post went back 3 months with detailed stories about the pregnancy and delivery, building this whole fake timeline before he'd even shown anyone the photos. Screenshots of everything went into a folder on my desktop that was getting bigger by the hour. My laptop dinged with an email from someone named Vaughn Stone at Facebook's safety team responding to my report from yesterday. He needed documentation to support removing Roy's content, including the police reports, Jacinta's analysis, and proof of my identity. The online forms took forever to fill out, uploading files and writing explanations for each piece of evidence while my eyes burned from staring at the screen. Daniela's car pulled into my driveway around dinner time and she came to the door carrying coffee and a box of donuts, her face puffy from crying. She hugged me tight and apologized over and over, saying she should have known I'd never hide something that big from her. We sat on the couch going through all the evidence together while she helped me organize everything for the lawyers and police, her anger at Roy growing with each fake photo we found. 2 days later, I woke up to find another gift on my doorstep, this time a stuffed teddy bear with a note that said, "For when you stop pretending and come home." I didn't touch it and called Detective Riddle right away, standing in my doorway watching the bear until a police officer arrived to bag it as evidence. The detective called me that afternoon with news that made everything worse and better at the same time. Roy had used stolen credit card numbers to buy all the baby items, adding fraud charges to the growing list of crimes. The fraud strengthened the case significantly, since it showed criminal intent beyond just the stalking and harassment, making it easier to get warrants and eventually prosecute him. I drove straight to the courthouse that morning to file for an emergency protective order, since the restraining order wasn't stopping Roy from leaving things at my house. The clerk at the family court window handed me a thick packet of forms to fill out while warning me that once filed, Roy would get official notice about the hearing scheduled for next week. She mentioned offhand that sometimes people get worse when they know court is coming, which made my hands shake as I wrote down all the details about the fake photos and baby clothes. The forms took 2 hours to complete with all the evidence I had to attach, including copies of Detective Riddle's reports and Jacinta's technical analysis proving the images were fake. I paid the filing fee and left with a temporary order that would last until the hearing, though the paper felt pretty useless against someone who'd already violated one restraining order. Marvin finally agreed to meet me at a coffee shop downtown after I'd texted him 20 times, begging for just 30 minutes to show him the evidence. He sat across from me looking tired and distant, while I spread out all of Jacinta's reports on the small table between us, pointing to the charts showing how the photos were made. He read through everything slowly, sipping his black coffee and not making eye contact, until he finally looked up and said he believed the photos were fake, but couldn't understand why Roy would do this to us. I tried explaining Roy's obsession from years ago, but Marvin just shook his head and said none of it made sense, then left saying he needed time to think. That night around 11, my phone started buzzing with texts from a number I didn't recognize, each message containing a new fake photo of me at different stages of pregnancy. The images showed me with a growing belly at what looked like baby showers, doctor appointments, and even one of me painting a nursery, all perfectly edited to look real. My stomach turned seeing how Roy had created this whole fake pregnancy timeline, and I immediately forwarded everything to Detective Riddle, even though the number showed up as unavailable when I tried to trace it. The next morning, I got an email from Vaughn Stone at Facebook, saying they'd removed some of Roy's posts, but others didn't violate their policies since they appeared to be personal family photos that didn't show violence or explicit content. He said he was escalating my case for manual review by a special team, but warned it could take weeks to get a decision, which felt like forever when new fake content kept appearing every day. I spent the afternoon calling lawyers who specialized in cyber harassment until I found one who understood AI-generated content and identity theft. Though her retainer fee meant draining the savings account Marvin and I had been building for fertility treatments, the lawyer said she'd seen similar cases starting to pop up and knew how to fight them, but I couldn't stop thinking about how we'd save that money for a real baby, not to fight fake ones. Jacinta called me the next day with more discoveries about how Roy had made the images look so real, explaining he'd downloaded hundreds of photos from my social media accounts to train the AI program. She showed me how he'd used my vacation photos, work events, and family gatherings to teach the computer exactly how I looked from every angle, which explained why even the small details were perfect. She added this information to her report as an addendum, documenting exactly which of my real photos had been used to create each fake image. 3 days later, I got a call from a hospital billing department about an unpaid balance for a delivery that supposedly happened 6 weeks ago, complete with my social security number and insurance information. The woman on the phone insisted their records showed I'd given birth to a healthy baby boy and owed them $8,000 after insurance, even when I explained I'd never been pregnant or visited their hospital. I had to file a fraud report with them and realized Roy had somehow created fake medical records too, making this identity theft way worse than just social media posts. Detective Riddle called that afternoon saying he'd been working with the hospital's security team and they'd found footage of someone matching Roy's description at their records office last week, trying to get copies of my supposed medical files. The security video showed him arguing with a clerk, who wouldn't give him the documents without proper ID, and his face was clear enough that they could use it as evidence. I was looking at my laptop that evening when a notification popped up that Roy had posted a new video on a different platform, and when I clicked it, my own voice came out of the speakers talking about our baby. He'd mapped my face onto another woman's body and somehow cloned my voice from videos I'd posted online, making it look and sound exactly like me discussing our son's sleeping schedule and feeding routine. The technology was so good that I almost believed it was really me for a second, and I had to close the laptop to stop my hands from shaking. I spent the next 2 hours recording my own video explaining everything with all the evidence laid out on my kitchen table, showing the police reports, Jacinta's analysis, and screenshots of Roy's fake accounts. I sent it privately to family and friends through direct messages, not wanting to post it publicly where Roy could see and respond with more fake content. Within an hour, my phone started ringing with shocked responses from cousins, aunts, and old friends who finally understood what was really happening and felt terrible for believing the lies. Jane showed up at my door around 7 with Chinese food and an overnight bag, pulling me into a hug the second I opened the door. She set up her laptop on my coffee table and started making a schedule where someone would check on me every few hours, calling my mom and Daniela to coordinate who would stop by when. We ate lo mein straight from the containers while she helped me install new security apps on my phone that would track any weird login attempts or location sharing. Around midnight when we were getting ready for bed, I heard a car moving real slow past my house and peeked through the blinds to see a dark sedan creeping by with its lights off. I grabbed my phone and got a picture of the license plate even though my hands were shaking, catching the first 3 letters and numbers before it turned the corner. Jane called Detective Riddle right away and gave him the plate info while I checked all the locks again and moved a chair in front of the back door. The detective called back 20 minutes later saying the car was a rental from the airport under a fake name, but the credit card trail led back to Roy's old accounts. The next morning, I went to work early to meet with HR before anyone else got there, bringing all my police reports and Jacinta's analysis to prove the maternity leave request was fake. They put a red flag on my file that meant security would get alerted if anyone tried to access my records, and the HR manager offered me paid time off to deal with everything. I took 3 days and spent the first one at home when Vaughn from Facebook finally called to say they'd deleted Roy's main account after reviewing all the legal papers I'd sent. He warned me Roy would probably make new accounts, but they'd set up monitoring on my name and photos to catch them faster, though it wasn't foolproof. My lawyer called that afternoon with good news about connecting me with a pro bono clinic downtown that specialized in cybercrimes and identity theft cases. The clinic had handled similar AI harassment cases and would take over most of my legal work without charging the huge fees, which meant I could put some money back in savings. I spent the next 2 days organizing everything for the protective order hearing, spreading all the evidence across my dining room table in chronological order. Jacinta's reports went in one pile, police documentation in another, screenshots in a third, and witness statements from family members in the last stack. My lawyer looked through everything and said we had one of the strongest cases she'd seen, especially with the doorbell camera footage and Roy violating the old restraining order. Marvin showed up Thursday evening to grab clothes from our bedroom, moving around me like I was a stranger while he packed a duffel bag. We ended up sitting on the bed talking for 3 hours about everything, and he finally admitted the fertility struggles had been eating at him for months. He said seeing those fake baby photos triggered something deep about feeling like a failure as a husband who couldn't give me a child. I showed him all the evidence again, and he said he believed me, but needed more time to process how someone could be that obsessed and dangerous. After he left, Daniela texted me screenshots of messages she'd been sending to our extended family with links to my video and Jacinta's reports. Most of our cousins and aunts had apologized for jumping to conclusions, and even our grandmother, who barely understood computers, said she felt awful for doubting me. Saturday's mail brought something that made my stomach drop. 5 fancy invitations to a baby shower for me scheduled at an Italian restaurant downtown next weekend. The invitations had my name and photo on them with details about registry gifts and requesting RSVPs to an email address Roy had created. I called the restaurant immediately and explained to the manager what was happening, sending them the police case number and restraining order documentation. They were shocked and canceled the reservation right away, promising to call the police if Roy showed up asking about it. Monday morning arrived too fast, and I put on my most professional outfit for court, my hands shaking as I fixed my hair and tried to eat some toast. The courthouse was packed, but my lawyer met me outside and walked me through security, explaining what would happen and reminding me to stay calm no matter what. When we entered the courtroom, I saw Roy for the first time in 4 years, sitting at the defendant's table in a suit I didn't recognize. He stared at me the whole time I walked to my seat, his eyes following every movement with an intensity that made my skin crawl and my stomach turn. I kept my face neutral and looked straight ahead at the judge's bench, gripping my lawyer's hand under the table while we waited for the hearing to start. The bailiff called everyone to order and the judge entered. An older woman with gray hair who looked tired but sharp as she settled into her chair and started flipping through the thick folder my lawyer had submitted. Roy's lawyer stood up first and started talking about artistic expression and how the photos were just creative projects, but the judge cut him off and asked to see the evidence herself. She spent 20 minutes going through every page while the courtroom stayed dead quiet, except for the sound of papers turning and someone coughing in the back row. I watched her face get more and more serious as she looked at Jacinta's technical reports showing how the AI worked and the screenshots of Roy's fake accounts pretending we had a baby together. The judge asked Roy directly if he'd created these images and posted them online, and he started rambling about love and destiny until his lawyer grabbed his arm to make him stop talking. She looked at the police reports about the gift bags left at my door and the doorbell camera footage of the hooded figure, then turned to Detective Riddle, who confirmed everything in his report was accurate. The judge's voice got hard when she granted the protective order and told Roy that any contact with me, direct or through social media or third parties, would mean immediate arrest and jail time. Roy's face went red and he started to stand up, but his lawyer pulled him back down while the judge kept talking about the serious nature of digital harassment and identity theft. She set another hearing date for the criminal charges and dismissed us, and I walked out of the courtroom on shaky legs with my lawyer patting my shoulder. Outside in the hallway, Marvin was waiting by the water fountain and came over as soon as he saw me, his face looking worn out but softer than it had been in weeks. He said he'd been thinking and wanted us to try couples therapy to work through everything that had happened, that he knew it wasn't my fault, but needed help processing it all. I nodded and felt something loosen in my chest for the first time since this nightmare started, and we stood there awkwardly until he asked if I wanted to get coffee and talk about finding a therapist. 3 days later, while I was at work, Vaughn from Facebook called my cell to tell me their expanded review had found 12 fake accounts Roy had made using variations of my name and photos. They'd removed everything and were putting new detection systems in place based on my case, tracking any uploads with my face or name to catch them faster. He apologized for how long it took and said they were taking AI harassment more seriously now, implementing new policies because of cases like mine. That same afternoon, I got a Google alert on my phone about a local news blog that had picked up the story about AI harassment and deepfakes, though they didn't use our real names. The article talked about the growing problem of people using AI to create fake photos for stalking and harassment, and even though it brought more attention than I wanted, maybe it would help someone else going through the same thing. My phone started buzzing with texts from numbers I didn't recognize, people who'd read the article and wanted to share their own stories or give advice, and I had to turn off notifications to focus on work. Friday night, Mom called to say she was organizing a family dinner for Sunday and wanted everyone there, no excuses, because she had something important to say. When Sunday came, I walked into her dining room to find 20 relatives crammed around the extended table, and Mom stood up and apologized in front of everyone for doubting me. She said she'd been wrong to believe those photos without talking to me first, and that the whole family owed me an apology for jumping to conclusions. My aunts and uncles started chiming in with their own apologies, and even my cousin from Arizona, who I hadn't talked to in years, sent a text saying she was sorry for believing the lies. Daniela squeezed my hand under the table while Mom kept talking about how we all needed to be more careful about what we see online and support each other better. The next week, Marvin and I had our first appointment with Clara, a therapist who specialized in couples dealing with trauma from outside sources like stalking or crime. Her office had soft green walls and too many throw pillows, but she listened without judgment as we explained everything that had happened with Roy and the fake photos. She helped us see how Roy's actions had triggered our existing problems about fertility and trust, that we'd been struggling before this but hadn't known how to talk about it. Clara gave us homework to do daily check-ins where we'd spend 10 minutes each morning sharing how we felt without the other person responding, just listening. She also wanted us to practice transparency by sharing our phone passwords and keeping our schedules open to each other, which felt weird but necessary after everything. We left with a workbook full of exercises about rebuilding trust and a follow-up appointment for next week, both of us quiet on the drive home but holding hands for the first time in over a month. Meanwhile, the Pro Bono Legal Clinic had been working on civil suits against Roy for harassment, identity theft, and emotional distress, saying we had a strong case for damages. They filed the paperwork while I was at work, and the lawyer called to say they were confident we'd win based on all the evidence and the criminal case already moving forward. 2 weeks after the protective order, I was checking my email when one of Jacinta's monitoring tools sent an alert about new fake accounts using my photos. Roy had made 3 new profiles on different platforms, posting more AI-generated pictures of me with a baby, violating the protective order just like we knew he would. I screenshot everything immediately and forwarded it to Detective Riddle, who said they'd issue an arrest warrant that day since Roy had clearly violated the judge's orders. That night at work, I stayed late to write a detailed post for our internal company newsletter about digital safety and deepfake awareness, turning my horrible experience into something that might protect my coworkers. The next morning, Detective Riddle called while I was getting ready for work and told me they had enough evidence to arrest Roy on multiple charges. He said the protective order violation plus the stalking and identity theft meant Roy was looking at serious jail time. They had teams out searching for him at all his known hangouts and work locations. I I felt relief wash over me, but also stayed nervous since Roy was still out there somewhere. After the call, I went online and ordered new security cameras for every angle of my house, plus smart locks that would alert my phone if anyone tried to break in. The installation guy came that afternoon and spent 3 hours setting everything up while I watched from my laptop at work. My neighbor texted that she'd seen the security truck and asked if everything was okay. When I explained about Roy, she said she'd keep an eye out and gave me her husband's number since he worked nights and could watch the street. 3 more neighbors offered to help after word spread through our group text. That evening, Daniela called me crying because she'd been going through old emails and found messages from months ago that looked like they came from me. The messages talked about feeling overwhelmed and having memory problems and needing space from family. She realized now they were fake, sent from an email address that was 1 letter off from mine. She forwarded everything to Detective Riddle right away and apologized again for not catching it sooner. During our next therapy session with Clara, Marvin finally opened up about how the fertility treatments had been making him feel like less of a man. He said when he saw those baby photos, part of him believed them because he felt like I deserved a real father for my children, not someone who couldn't give me a baby. Clara helped us work through how Roy had weaponized our deepest insecurities against us. We held hands and cried together for the first time since this whole mess started. 2 days later, I was making dinner when Detective Riddle called with the news I'd been waiting for. They'd arrested Roy at the public library downtown where he was using their computers to make more fake content about me. The librarian had recognized him from the news coverage and called police immediately. Detective Riddle said Roy was being held without bail because of the repeated violations, and the judge considered him a flight risk. I dropped my phone and just stood there shaking while pasta water boiled over on the stove. The family group chat that had been so angry at me weeks ago started sharing articles about AI safety and deepfake technology. Mom sent a link about how to spot fake photos. Daniela shared a video about digital harassment. Even my cousin from Arizona, who barely used technology, posted about privacy settings. Everyone was learning from what happened to me and trying to protect themselves. They kept saying how sorry they were for not believing me and how they should have known I'd never lie about something like that. 6 weeks after that first horrible phone call from Marvin, he finally moved back home. We'd been doing therapy twice a week and daily check-ins like Clara suggested. He brought his suitcase in quietly, and we just stood in the hallway looking at each other. Neither of us knew what to say, so we just hugged and stayed that way for a long time. We weren't fixed or back to normal, but we were trying, and that felt like enough for now. Clara said healing would take time and we'd have setbacks, but we were doing the work. That weekend, I sat down at my computer and started deleting years of social media posts. Every photo, every status update, every check-in that Roy could have used to study my life. I changed all my privacy settings to the strictest levels and removed anyone I didn't know personally. My online world got much smaller, but also much safer. I only accepted friend requests from people I'd met in real life and trusted completely. Roy had taken my photos and turned them into weapons against me, but I wouldn't give him or anyone else that chance again. I kept thinking about how easy it had been for him to destroy my life with some software and stolen photos. But here I was, still standing, still fighting, still myself, despite everything he'd tried to take from me. All right, that's a wrap for today. Thanks for sticking with me through all the questioning and wondering. It's been a blast exploring these little moments together. Until next time, like the video, it helps more than you think.